Hashtag Section 1. Setting the stage. The village of Hoa Lin sat nestled between towering mountains and vast rice fields, a place where time moved as slowly as the winding river that snaked through it hard. Life in Hoa Lin was ruled by caution. Every decision, every action was weighed against the looming specter of fear. The elders whispered of ancient forces that punished the reckless, while children were taught from infancy to tread lightly, to obey without question, and to never challenge the unknown. Fear was not just an emotion here. It was a way of life. Yet, in the midst of this quiet, controlled existence, there was Bao. Bao had never understood the suffocating fear that gripped his people, while others hesitated at the edge of the forest, whispering of spirits that would steal their souls. He walked among the trees without trepidation. When storms raged and villagers huddled in their homes, murmuring prayers to unseen deities, Bao stood outside, letting the rain soak his skin. He did not mock their fear, nor did he claim to be immune to it. He simply did not allow it to dictate his every move. His grandfather, Lao, had been the same. A man of few words and quiet wisdom, Lao had often told Bao, "Fear is only a shadow. It has no weight unless you give it one." He had raised Bao not to dismiss fear, but to understand it, to confront it rather than be consumed by it. But Lao was gone now, and Bao was alone in his beliefs. The first true test of his courage came on the night of the decree. It was an evening like any other, lanterns flickering in the gentle breeze, the scent of jasmine mingling with the earthy aroma of the fields. The village square bustled with traders, their voices rising and falling in a familiar rhythm. Then, suddenly, the bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence fell over the crowd. The village elder, a frail man with a back hunched by time, stepped forward, holding a parchment seal with crimson wax. His hands trembled as he broke the seal and read aloud. Asterisk, by order of the Supreme Governor, all able-bodied men shall report to the fortress at dawn. Those who refuse shall be deemed enemies of the state. Asterisk, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The fortress, an ominous structure perched atop the northern cliffs, was a place of mystery and dread. No one who entered its gates spoke of what lay beyond. Some returned, eyes hollow and mouths shut. Others were never seen again. Fear, like a sudden gust of wind, swept through the village. Mothers clutched their sons, whispers of escape and hiding places already taking shape. Men, their faces pale, exchanged anxious glances. Even the bravest among them hesitated. All except Bao. "Why do you look as though you've already been sentenced to death?" he asked, his voice steady. An older man, his face lined with worry, turned to him. "You do not understand, Bao. The fortress, it is not just a place. It is a fate worse than death. To go is to be lost." "Have you been there?" Bao asked. The man hesitated. "No, but everyone knows. The stories." "Stories," Bao interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "You fear something you have never seen. You obey a shadow." His words, though spoken without malice, landed like a blow. Murmurs rose among the villagers, some agreeing, others glaring at him in disbelief. The elder's sharp voice cut through the murmurs. "Bao," he said, his eyes grave, "you have always been different. But hear me now. Defiance is not courage. If you do not fear for yourself, at least fear for those who will suffer because of you." Bao met his gaze, the weight of the warning settling over him. He understood what the elder meant. His choices did not affect him alone. That night, as the village prepared for the inevitable, Bao sat by the river, staring at the moon's reflection in the water. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. Fear is only a shadow. The choice before him was clear. Submit to fear and allow it to dictate his fate, or step into the unknown and seek the truth. By dawn, when the first light painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Bao had made his decision. He would go to the fortress. Here's Section 2, continuing the story with a compelling narrative that deepens the conflict and character development. Hashtag Section 2, rising action and conflict. The fortress loomed in the distance, its towering walls bathed in the pale light of dawn. A procession of villagers, some trembling, some resigned, walked in silence along the narrow dirt path leading to its gates. The weight of fear hung heavy in the air, an unspoken burden each man carried. Bao walked among them, his step steady, his expression unreadable. He could feel their eyes on him, hear their whispers as they wondered how he could remain so calm. "Does he not fear what awaits?" someone murmured. "He is a fool," another spat. "Fearless or reckless, it makes no difference. The fortress will break him as it has broken all before him." Bao did not respond. He had learned long ago that those who lived in fear would lash out at those who did not share it. But their fear was not his own, and he would not carry it for them. At the entrance of the fortress, a row of guards clad in black armor stood like statues, their faces hidden behind featureless masks. Without a word, they ushered the men inside, sealing the massive gates behind them with a resounding clang. The inside of the fortress was colder than Bao had expected. Stone walls stretched endlessly into dimly lit corridors, the scent of damp earth and iron lingering in the air. A sharp command broke the silence. "Line up!" A man stepped forward, his presence commanding. He was tall, draped in a crimson cloak that billowed behind him. His face bore the scars of countless battles, his eyes like shards of ice. "I am Commander Vu," he declared. "You are here because the governor commands it. You will obey, or you will suffer." A murmur of unease rippled through the group. "You will be tested," Vu continued, his gaze sweeping over them. "Your mind, your body, your loyalty. Those who prove themselves will be rewarded. Those who fail." His lips curled into a thin smile. "Well, failure is not an option." Bao met the commander's gaze without flinching. He could sense something beyond the man's stern exterior, an unspoken challenge, a test of will. "Step forward," Vu ordered, gesturing toward a large wooden door at the end of the corridor. "Your trials begin now." One by one, the men were led to the door, their expressions ranging from determination to outright terror. The sounds of struggle, of shouted commands and strained breaths echoed through the halls. When Bao's turn came, he stepped through the threshold and found himself in a vast, torchlit chamber. In the center stood a massive pit, its depths shrouded in darkness. A narrow beam which stretched across it, a bridge, if one dared to call it that. Vu's voice rang out from the shadows. "Cross." A murmur of disbelief spread among the men watching. The beam was no wider than a handspan. A single misstep would mean falling into whatever lay beneath. One of the villagers hesitated before stepping forward. He took 3 shaky steps before losing his balance, tumbling into the abyss with a scream that was swallowed by the darkness. The room fell silent. Bao inhaled slowly, stepping onto the beam. His heartbeat was steady, his movements fluid. He did not look down, did not let doubt seep into his mind. Step by step, he moved with measured precision, feeling the wood shift beneath his weight. When he reached the other side, he turned to face Vu. The commander studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Again," he ordered. Bao did not question. He turned and crossed back just as smoothly. "Again." He crossed a third time. The room was deathly silent. Even the guard seemed taken aback. No one had ever crossed once without hesitation, let alone thrice. Vu stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You do not fear falling?" Bao met his gaze. "Falling is only dangerous if you never learn to rise." For the first time, something flickered in the commander's eyes, curiosity. He turned to the rest of the men. "Take him to the inner chambers. The real trial begins now." The word sent a ripple of unease through the group. The outer trials were brutal, but the inner chambers, few ever returned from those. Bao did not resist as the guards led him deeper into the fortress. His path was set. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it as he always had, without fear. And so, the doors closed behind him, sealing his fate. #### Section 3. Climax and Revelation. The inner chambers of the fortress were nothing like the rest of the stronghold. The cold stone corridors gave way to a vast underground hall, its ceiling lost in darkness. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering shadows over an arena of sand and stone. At the center stood a circular platform, its edges marked by jagged spikes. Bao was led into the chamber, his wrists unbound but his path unmistakably clear. Around him, Figures in dark robes stood in silence, their faces obscured by heavy hoods. Their presence was eerie, like specters watching condemned take their final steps. Commander Vu approached, his crimson cloak trailing behind him. His expression was unreadable, but something in his stance had changed. This was no longer just a test. This was something deeper. "You have done well," Vu said, his voice calm. "You have crossed the pit without fear." But that was only the beginning. Bao did not respond. He simply watched, waiting. Vu gestured toward a platform. "There is one final trial. The trial of truth. Step forward." Bao ascended the platform without hesitation. The moment his feet touched the stone, the doors behind him groaned shut. The chamber fell into an even heavier silence. Then, from the darkness beyond the torches, a second figure emerged. Bao stiffened. The man before him was gaunt yet strong, his face lined with scars. But it was his eyes that held Bao's attention, deep-set, sharp, and filled with a knowledge that came only from surviving what others could not. "You were never afraid, were you?" the man said, his voice steady. Bao studied him, then answered, "Fear is a choice." The man's lips curled slightly. "No, fear is an instinct. The choice is in how you wield it." He stepped closer. "Do you even know why you are here?" Bao's jaw tightened. "Because I did not fear the decree." A low chuckle. "No, you are here because men like you are rare. Because fear rules this world, and those who do not submit to it must be understood or eliminated." At those words, the torches around the chamber dimmed. The silence became suffocating. Commander Vu spoke, his voice softer now. "This is not just a fortress. It is a crucible. Those who enter are tested not for strength alone, but for their understanding of fear itself." He gestured to the robed figures. "These are not mere prisoners. They are the unseen architects of control. They dictate what the people fear, what they obey." Bao's pulse remained steady, but his mind raced. "You keep them afraid," he said. "You shape the stories that bind them." The gaunt man nodded. "Fear keeps order. It keeps the weak from challenging the strong. It prevents chaos. And yet, here you stand, proof that not all men can be controlled this way." A pause. Then the man asked the one question that mattered. "Will you join us?" The chamber seemed to shrink around Bao. For the first time since stepping into the fortress, doubt crept into his thoughts. They were offering him a choice, but not one he had expected. If he accepted, he would no longer be an outsider. He would become part of the force that dictated fear itself. He would wield it rather than be subject to it. But if he refused, he exhaled slowly. Asterisk fear is only a shadow. It has no weight unless you give it one. Asterisk. Bao lifted his gaze. "I will not rule through fear," he said, his voice clear. The gaunt man's expression did not change. If he was disappointed, he did not show it. Instead, he turned to Vu. "Then he will leave here either as a ghost or a legend." The torches flared, and the robed figures moved as one. The trial was not over yet. #### Section 4. Resolution and Legacy. The chamber pulsed with a strange energy as the robed figures advanced. Their silent movements were unnatural, their presence oppressive. The gaunt man had stepped back into the shadows, watching, waiting. Commander Vu remained still, his expression unreadable. Bao did not flinch. He had made his choice, and he would face the consequences without regret. One of the figures raised a hand. A sharp gust of wind tore through the chamber, extinguishing half the torches. The remaining flames flickered wildly, casting the room into an eerie half-darkness. A test. Bao had not fought for dominance. He had not cowered in submission. He had chosen something neither Vu nor the others had expected, to reject their rule of fear entirely. And now, they would see if his conviction could survive the final ordeal. The first strike came from the right, fast, precise. A glint of steel flashed in the dim light. Bao twisted just in time, the blade grazing past his ribs. He dropped low, sweeping a leg beneath his attacker. The figure moved unnaturally, avoiding the strike with an impossible grace. Another came from behind. Bao spun, deflecting a second blade with the force of his forearm. Pain lanced through him, but he did not let it slow him. They were not fighting to kill him. Not yet. They were measuring him, weighing his worth. The gaunt man's voice echoed in the chamber. Do you still believe fear is only a shadow? Bao exhaled, steadying his breath. Yes. A figure lunged. This time, Bao did not dodge. Instead, he caught the attacker's wrist, twisting with controlled precision. The robed figure staggered, momentarily unbalanced. Bao used the opening, striking forward and sending his opponent crashing into the sand. The movement sent a ripple through the watching figures. Vu's eyes gleamed. The gaunt man's lips curled slightly. Enough, he commanded. The robed figure stepped back at once, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as they had come. Bao stood, his breath steady despite the pain in his ribs. Blood darkened his tunic, but his stance remained unshaken. The gaunt man stepped forward. For the first time, his expression was unreadable. You understand now, don't you? Bao met his gaze. I understand that fear is a weapon, but I will not use it the way you do. A silence stretched between them. Then, to Bao's surprise, the man let out a quiet chuckle. And that, he said, is why we cannot keep you. Bao tensed. Was this another deception? Another test? Vu stepped closer, studying him with quiet intensity. You will leave this place. But what happens after that is beyond our control. The gaunt man inclined his head. Fear rules the weak, Bao. But those who master it must walk a different path. We will not stop you. We will simply watch and see what you become. The heavy doors groaned open. Bao hesitated only a moment before stepping through. As he emerged from the fortress, the morning sun painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. He inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs. Behind him, the gates of the fortress stood unmoving, their secret sealed once more. The village of Hoa Lin awaited his return, but Bao knew that he was not the same man who had left, and neither was his story finished.